Good afternoon and welcome to the Pennsylvania Press Club. I'm Francine Schertzer, President of the Pennsylvania Press Club and your host for today's luncheon. Joining me at the head table is Chuck Quinnen, Senior Vice President and Chief of Government Affairs at Leading Age Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your support. The Pennsylvania Press Club Luncheon Series could not be made possible without the support of the generous organizations listed on our sponsor banner. Today's luncheon is being taped and will be carried throughout Pennsylvania to the television and digital audience of PCN. Our speaker today is Senate Appropriations Majority Chair, Senator Scott Martin. Scott Martin is a lifelong Lancaster County resident with deep roots in the community. He was elected to the first term representing the 13th Senatorial District in November 2016 and re-elected in 2020. While in the Senate, dozens of Scott's bills have become law, as well as constitutional amendment, which was approved by the Pennsylvania voters in May 2021, that limited the power of a governor to issue open-ended emergency declarations that last longer than necessary. Scott currently serves as chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, which plays a critical role in negotiating and developing the state budget and is responsible for reviewing all legislation for its fiscal impact. He previously served as chair of the Senate Education Committee and Senate Local Government Committee. Outside of his regular Senate responsibilities, Scott also serves as chair of the Pennsylvania Athletic Oversight Committee and was elected to serve as chair of the Chesapeake Bay Commission for 2023. Prior to his election to the state Senate, Scott served as a Lancaster County Commissioner and helped to clean up what had become a dysfunctional and ineffective government. As commissioner, Scott never voted for a tax increase, downsized government by cutting duplicative agencies and departments, reduced debt by $40 million, and lowered costs for taxpayers through privatization and public employee benefit reform. He led many statewide reform efforts throughout the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania and was elected chair of the Republican Caucus of County Commissioners for 8 years. Before entering public service, Scott was successful in the private sector as a licensed realtor and local landlord. In addition, for 13 years, he worked with the juvenile justice system, including serving as director of the Lancaster County Youth Intervention Center. Running the county's juvenile detention and emergency shelter care facilities, he oversaw the effective operation of a $5.5 million budget and 150 employee organization. Scott was also the elected vice president of the Juvenile Detention Center Association of Pennsylvania and served on the Pennsylvania Commission of Crime and Delinquency's Detention Steering Committee. Scott served on the board of directors of Dr. Gene A. Carpenter Football Foundation, volunteers as a youth sport coach in wrestling and football, and gave his time and effort to groups like the United Way of Lancaster County and the Pennsylvania Dutch Convention and Visitors Bureau. Scott is a graduate of Lancaster Catholic High School, where he was a PIAA and national heavyweight wrestling champion, and Millersville University, where he graduated with a degree in sociology, criminal justice, and became a 3-time first-team PSAC defensive tackle and 2-time All-American. After his college career, Scott was the first agent camp invitee of the New York Giants in the NFL and had done 3 different stints in the American Football League. Scott has been inducted into the Lancaster Catholic Athletic Hall of Fame, in Millersville University Athletic Hall of Fame, the Lancaster Lebanon League Wrestling Hall of Fame, the District 3 Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Lancaster County Sports Hall of Fame, and the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame, Susquehanna Valley Chapter. Recently, in recognition of the 150th anniversary of college football, Scott was named the 150 greatest players contributors to the Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference history, one of 10 Millersville Marauders to earn that honor. Scott and his wife Amber are the proud parents of 4 children, Alexa, Hayden, Olivia, and Gavin. I present to you Senator Martin.
Who wrote that thing? Well, it's really good to be with you today. And, you know, I think I'd like to start off maybe talking about some stuff that wasn't listed in there and kind of intertwine it with the fact that we all know what yesterday was, correct? Guys, you should be saying that much louder. Mother's Day. And plus, I know my beloved mom is watching here today. Her and my dad just texted me and let me know. But you know, how grateful are we for the moms in our lives, or the cherished memories that we have of moms who are no longer with us. And I had some of the most supportive parents that a young man could ask for. Now, what I want to tell you about, and I know she's watching, is I was the oldest of 7 kids. And as 7 kids, we didn't have a lot. We definitely learned the difference between wants and needs growing up. But my mom used to do stuff with us. And I know she's probably cracking up watching this now, but does anyone remember The Sound of Music? So kind of like, we were like the Martin von Trapps. If you can picture me wearing those suspenders and a knickers and imagine having to perform on stage, singing songs from The Sound of Music or My Fair Lady or South Pacific. Whenever we were with my mom, she had all the show tunes. But there's something just odd about having to sing 16 going on 17 with your sister. She appreciated that. That's why I like driving in my dad's car, because he had like Shaka Khan, The Best of Cream, and all that. But no, I've been very blessed, love our parents, and love you, Mom. So there's a lot going on in the Commonwealth right now. I've spent about 3 years talking about some of the real serious challenges that we face. And often we hear a lot about a lot of the different bigger topic items: education, higher ed, senior services. Throw a plug out to your sponsor. But what's been really lurking behind the scenes is a demographic crisis. For about 100 straight years, every 10 years we have a census, we are not keeping pace, whether it's the birth replacement rate in Pennsylvania, whether it's the number of kids who are picking up and leaving home and moving to other states, whether it's closures of various plants or jobs and going to other communities. And listen, we pretty much have lost a congressional seat every census over that last period of time. And I've said it often, our fastest growing age demographic is 85 and above. And we all know that the number of kids graduating through our high school pipeline continues to decline. And the Center for Rural Pennsylvania just came out with their report stating the fact that we just had the smallest kindergarten class enrollment, I think, in over 40 years. It's our future workforce. It's our future tax base. So how we position this state for growth is so critically important. And you're seeing at least an effort over the last few years. When you heard about the fact that we had one of the highest corporate net income tax rates in the entire country, well, it was important that we focused on making that more competitive and now getting that phased down. But that's not the only thing we have to do. When you talk about the fact that the number of kids that are fleeing this state, or that we're the second largest importer of out-of-state students, but they're not staying here. How do we change those things? See, we have to grow Pennsylvania, not just economically, but demographically. What kind of policy positions will we have that will make folks want to stay here, make folks from the outside want to come here, plant their roots here, send their kids to schools here? That is the biggest challenge, because the outlook, it doesn't take someone to really quick to figure out the fact that the numbers just don't add up with where we're going right now. So growth is critically important. You probably recently saw that we unveiled the Grow PA initiative. Our Grow PA initiative is specifically designed, to get a return on the investment of taxpayer dollars. It completely makes sense that when the taxpayers are funding post-secondary education, that there's a return for that. And if we can position that return to be a return that we're getting people trained in some of Pennsylvania's most critically needed areas, whether it's nursing, whether it's teachers, whether it's trades, whether it's pretty much everything in the criminal justice system right now, whether it's police all the way down to correction officers, how do we get those workforce needs filled? And when you couple that with the goal of also getting them to stay here in PA as that financial incentive. It's really different than the institutional-based system that you've heard, that money going out the door, or the typical student aid that's been going out the door before. We want to design something that gets more young people into those critically needed fields, but more importantly, get them to stay here and send their kids to school here. Now, we also need to focus on things like our energy policy. All too often, you see these things end up in court. It's in court right now. What the former governor had proposed with the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, this current governor has kind of put his own hands on now by appealing that unanimous decision on their ability as the executive to implement that carbon tax and what that would mean to our price of energy, not just as us as individuals, but for us as institutions, as hospitals, as schools, or to businesses, especially a state that is as large as it is in manufacturing. So energy needed and driven types of businesses that we would actually try to make ourselves uncompetitive by putting out so much more that was going to lead to higher costs. But what it really is creating is a lot of instability in something that I believe a lot of people take for granted, and that's the reliability of our grid. I mean, we don't need to go too far in history to see what's happening in certain parts of this country. Texas, not even 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, Valentine's Day? And we certainly have a much different climate than Texas does. But the thing about it is that when the grid fails, and I hate to be so succinct, because people die. And if you want to turn around an economy, you want affordable, reliable energy. And it's here. And we're not saying people want to do it dirty, but you have to embrace it. You have to give it certainty. And if we want to continue to be a state that sees multi-billion-dollar investments going to West Virginia, going to Ohio, it should be here. But instead, what's happening is we're seeing premature closures of plants that actually employ thousands of people. And when that occurs, not only are we losing baseload capacity that actually keeps our grid strong, we're actually losing the backbone of that workforce who are taking their skills and going to states where they can get jobs, where they can pay their bills and put their kids through college. That's what's at stake if we do not settle this issue and say that Pennsylvania is open for business. Pennsylvania wants to do energy the right way, the strong way, and maintain our status as the #1 producer of electricity in the entire country. Last week, you saw another initiative. We obviously have some disagreements with the governor on how to utilize Pennsylvania's fund balance. The governor currently is proposing a 7.1% increase in his budget, which is to the tune of about $3.2 billion. Now, I want you to keep in that framework is that we also have a current $1 billion structural deficit in Pennsylvania. And what I mean is that we're spending about $1 billion more than what we're taking in this Commonwealth. We fought hard to get monies put in the rainy day fund. Years ago, we were one of the worst states in the country. I think we had enough money in state government reserves to operate for 2 hours if things went bad. And now we're in the middle pack of states. And we also have not only that $6.2 billion that's sitting in the rainy day fund, we have reserve, a lot of which has come from the fact of the federal assistance that all the different states received through the federal emergency pandemic relief monies that came. And so we did it right. We did not want to use a lot of these funds for one-time reoccurring expenditures, something that you saw happen during the stimulus years, if you remember, that left massive holes in the budget. We wanted to create a framework that would actually position ourselves to be more solid financially. We've been rewarded for it. Upgrades by our positive outlooks by Fitch, by Moody's and S&P. We had a bond upgrade that saved money when we did it. These are all great things that Pennsylvania hasn't been able to pull off in a very long period of time. But what's even more important is that if we can get our budget into a structurally balanced position, there's other things that we can do to make ourselves more competitive, to draw big investment here to PA and good families sustaining jobs with job creators, whether it's the accelerating that corporate net income tax sooner, whether it's direct, dealing with net operating loss, which is a huge issue with our business community. Those are the things you can get to real quickly and do all kinds of positive things to help make us more competitive once we get our budget to that position. But we won't get there by creating an even bigger structural deficit. And so what the governor proposed doing in 2 years, we sit here, it's almost June of 2022, if we would enact the governor's budget as is, in June of 2026, we'd be voting on the 26-27 budget, where all the fund balance would be gone, all the rainy day fund would be gone, and we would still have a $4 billion hole in our budget in just 2 years. In addition to that, the proposals that they want to use a lot of these extra funds for, we have a different mindset as to how we want to utilize them. If we have this reserve, how about every single taxpayer in Pennsylvania that earns a paycheck? How about we give them relief? And that's the tack that we took with the action that you saw the Senate take last week, and actually in very strong bipartisan fashion, if anyone ever saw vote count. I think it was 36 votes for it. There's a lot of people struggling out there. And whether it's through giving them relief through their income taxes, or whether it was through the elimination of the gross receipts tax, because all of us can relate to paying our energy bills. And not just as this is homeowners, but if you run a school, you run a hospital, and its impact of the cost of energy on everybody, to be able to provide relief for everyone across the board, that's what we say. So if you want to throw your stake in the ground, on the spending side, we're going to show who we really believe we want to invest in and give back to and stabilize in this state, and that's the people of Pennsylvania. All the issues that I have just talked about in terms of our competitiveness and whatnot, these are all things that can be fixed. But they're not all easy political answers to get towards. To get to that magic 26, 102, and 1 in Harrisburg. But there is roadmaps out there that we could make this state so much more competitive, and more importantly, on a path to growth that's so desperately needed for Pennsylvania's future and for future generations. So I want to thank the Pennsylvania Press Club for having me here today. I absolutely look forward to answering any questions that any of you may have. It's a very diverse group here today. The floor is yours, Francine.
Will the Senate Republicans push for lifelong scholarships as strenuously as they did last year?
So I'd say probably 100%. We spend a lot of money in education here in Pennsylvania. And actually, I will say we probably spent an additional $5.2 billion more than when we were first sued, saying that we didn't spend enough money in how we fund education. But we have an issue in PA where you have some of the worst performing schools in terms of proficiency in every subject area also happen to be the schools that we spend the most amount of money on. And it's not even close. So accountability has to be part of the system. And whether you talk about the inroads we've made with the Educational Improvement Tax Credit, which I think currently sits at $555 million, or whether you talk about Lifeline scholarships, are probably more important now than ever. Post-pandemic, you have seen more of an explosion of parents who are 100% interested, invested in the type of education their kids are getting. Whether they're having their individualized needs met, protecting their children if they're victims of being bullied or have been victims of some sort of assault at school, or they have just a special way of needing to learn that a one-size-fits-all mentality hasn't been able to benefit their kid. And every year that goes by in their development, getting it right is very important. So the ultimate form of accountability in education is when you have vested parents who are saying, this isn't working for my kid, and I want to put them in something that works for them. And so that will never falter and will continue to be our push. I know that as opposed to last year, this year the governor did not include it in his budget. The governor claims that he is still supportive of it, but it's obviously an opportunity in our worst performing, 15% performing schools that we believe kids should get an opportunity to get put into an environment that will actually have a real meaningful impact on their future and their lives.
Do you believe that regulatory overreach is an issue in Pennsylvania? And if so, what is the best way to reset the proper relationship between the executive and legislative branches?
So regulatory reform is another that's often cited when people say they made the decision not to make a big investment in PA, or why they don't want to go through any potential expansion here in Pennsylvania, and they look to other states. We usually hear about the tax rate, but more often than not, we hear about the regulatory burden. I think we were off to a good start with the administration when they came out last year and wanting to get a report back from all these agencies about their different processes and how they can improve them. They did get those reports. They did say they wanted to give a refund on, let's say, a permit application. But for me, it's one thing to say you're going to give money back to people. I still want that project to occur. I still want that growth to occur. And so to me, being a legislator, but I'm just going to step back and say, having been in the executive branch before and have running things, the biggest area of impact to get into the weeds of the bureaucracy and process improvement and accountability comes from the executive branch, because there's nothing more frustrating than, as a legislature, you make a law of some sort that says XYZ permit has to be answered by such and such a date, and years later it hasn't happened. And I can give you some pretty horrendous takes on this. And one had a happy ending, which was years ago when I was a commissioner, we competed to bring Purdue to Lancaster County to open up a soybean extraction facility. They were going to purchase steam from the Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority's facility next door. And I'm not even making a political statement when I say this, because it was through a Republican and Democratic administration. 8 years of going through that wrangling, trying to hold them on a product called hexane that had a 75-year safety record, holding them to the highest air quality standard that had ever been seen in the entire country, and even beyond what the manufacturers of air scrubbers could even guarantee. If it wasn't for central Pennsylvania and Lancaster County's intensity of agriculture, I think Purdue would have walked. They stayed there. But 8 years of time and money and effort, and I can give you much other examples. I mean, next door to us in Chester County, PA, in Kennett Square, mushroom capital of the world, someone thought it'd be a great idea in the mushroom capital of the world to actually build a mushroom processing facility. And I think in that case, it went about 2 years of dealing, trying to make its way through permitting and regulatory, where they finally threw their hands up in the air. They actually stopped the project here that they were going to put, and they went right across the border into Maryland. And I think 90 days later, they were actually building. Like, these are the little examples, and they all add up all over PA. Getting it right regulatorily, and there's nothing more frustrating. I can tell you a lot of horror stories from the Pennsylvania, central PA perspective in the district that I'm in, but to hear the inconsistencies of the different regions of like DEP, it's like they're not even operating off the same playbook. The playbook should be the law. But we keep making it more difficult for us, even when we have growth opportunities, to get it done in a timely fashion. And if we care about Pennsylvania growing, if we care about wanting people to come here or expand in PA, we should all want to see this to be the most efficient system that we can. And I hope the administration does a lot more in this area and working with us. My frustration is if we keep passing laws, but we're not having someone holding them accountable to those laws, then that's a real problem. But I think that's another way that we can get good bipartisan support and hopefully making the system better for PA.
You've been a great supporter of girls wrestling. How important is it to have PIAA to officially sanction the sport?
It's critically important. I love this question. Girls wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the United States. We have been hosting also, if anyone's been paying attention, having sports facilities like Spooky Nook down the street or whatnot. The Team USA men's and women's teams. The women were here last year, the world team training. And of course, we're hoping they're going to be coming back really soon here, the Olympic team, now that they're set to train as well. This is another opportunity for our young ladies to engage in one of the oldest sports, one of the first Olympic sports, and create more opportunities and pathways in life. And to see how quickly Pennsylvania rallied its schools throughout the whole entire state to step up for the girls. I think not too long after we hit that sanctioning goal of 100, I think they might be getting close to 200 teams now. They had the first championships at Hershey this year. We're going to have a wrestling day where we honor them coming up here at the Capitol. I had a special deal with a young lady from McCaskey, which was the first school to sanction girls or to create a girls wrestling team. Her name's Journey Rodriguez, and we had a little deal. She won. She's going to come to the Capitol, and we have a picture of her and I squaring off, and we're both going to sign it and get it framed and hang it in my office. But I've never been more thrilled, and if we can see that momentum carry over to the NCAA level too, and this is great for Title IX as well. When you talk about, because I've lived through an era when you have schools that have, a football team, well, there isn't a female equivalent to the football team. So what would happen is, in order to even things up, you saw an era where you had a lot of boys sports teams being eliminated. So the more that we can, instead of eliminating on the boys' side, how about we create more opportunities for our young ladies on the other side? And that to me is in the spirit of that, and is a wonderful thing for our young ladies and for Pennsylvania's future. Senate
Republicans have stressed the need to build the state's fiscal reserve, but now they're pushing for a major tax cut. Can you explain the shift?
Well, make no mistake about it. At the table when we create the budget, I'm still going to be pushing for whatever the amount of money is that we coming in and how we prioritize things. If anything, this is a signal that we're not going to let anyone just say, we're just going to pick who's going to get this extra amount of money, and we're going to create a massive budget hole moving forward. If they're very serious, and I think the term was investing in Pennsylvanians, was a term the governor used in his budget address, why not invest in every Pennsylvanian? And so we'll see where these negotiations, I'm well aware of what the playing field is right now between the House, Senate, and the governor as to where we're at. But I think when you ask the Senate Republican caucus that if that money's going to go out the door, I don't want it going out the door and create another massive hole on the spending side. I'd much rather see the people of Pennsylvania get the relief across the board. And so, but whatever that revenue ends up being, and revenues have been improving over the last couple months. They had a very bad start to the year. Interest income and earnings have really saved the day in a lot of our areas of it. But to see revenues growing, especially as we're also reducing the corporate net income tax again, and it's scheduled for the next phase down, we just think it's a better way to look at the budget. At the end of the day, we all got to come to the table and negotiate what the final spend number is going to be. But I'm much rather in the camp of everyone as opposed to winners and losers.
What are the chances of skills game legislation to move and be part of this budget discussion? And if so, what tax rate do you expect to see placed on them, or what rate would you hope to see?
I think there's absolutely an opportunity to look at skilled games and bringing them into the fold. There's a lot of disagreement. I think it's not even a political disagreement. I think you have folks who think tax rates should be the same as the casinos, and others who think, well, these aren't gambling. There needs to be a common ground found on this and bringing them under the fold, but I think that's definitely an area where you could see some good bipartisan movement on bringing them into the fold.
Are there major priorities outside of taxes and higher education, K through 12 reform that your caucus will be advocating for in this budget?
Well, I think you're going to continue to see us take the steps necessary to show that we need to really give certainty and point towards growth in terms of our energy sector here in Pennsylvania because of the critical needs of it. In a perfect world, the governor would, withdraw his appeal to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and come to the table and work on energy policy. We have not seen a willingness to do so yet, but these are the major areas. But, it's funny, as often as people just want to talk about education or just talk about, the post-secondary efforts to position things to grow, we also have critical services that should be a priority here in PA too, and that we work with very closely. Our nursing home community is one. I know they've had their struggles. A lot of folks may not know, but they were kind of wrestled into an agreement on staffing ratios over a 2-year period, and it's not going in their best interest financially, especially in terms of being competitive to get people with the workforce shortages. It's made it even more difficult to hit a lot of those ratios, and it's added a lot of burden to them. So, but there's other critical areas. I also like to warn people too that prior to the pandemic, our number one fiscal driver here in PA was Medicaid and the growth of supplemental spending. And when I say that it's 1 year there might be overspending because of federal rules to the tune of $500 million. Next year was $1 billion, and we would have to settle that at the budget table. And we don't have a 100% control over those expenses. It makes it very frustrating when we have to reconcile at the end of a budget year. Well, that all kind of got masked through the pandemic years because there was FMAP, federal emergency funding coming for Medicaid, and no one was talking about Medicaid. I mean, I know about it. It was the first bill I ever put on the governor's desk, which he vetoed, was Medicaid reform. But this topic's coming roaring back, and will have an absolute impact on our ability to do everything across the board. And it also has an impact on everyone, even if you have a health insurance plan through your private employer. But you talk about Medicaid has been so watered down and diluted over the years that its ability to pay the true cost of service is nowhere near where it should be. You're talking about some cases 40 cents on the dollar. Dentists, I think at one point, were 28 cents on the dollar. And you wonder why doctors and dentists are no longer taking Medicaid patients, or why you can't find them. I mean, back when I worked in the juvenile system, trying to find a dentist to come and do work with kids was almost near impossible. And no one's in business to take a loss. But if we don't do something to really put guardrails on Medicaid, to say this is who it's truly for, right? This is the safety net that it is. It's not designed to be a program for everybody and their whim. And right now, you actually have, called an 1115 waiver that the current administration has submitted to the federal government that could actually grow our Medicaid expenditures by over $3 billion. Over half of that would be our responsibility. And they're talking about things like paying people's rent for people coming out of prison, or buying pots and pans. Well, I'm sorry, A, the program's already oversubscribed, and B, there's a lot of Pennsylvanians struggling with affordable housing. They shouldn't have to be able to commit an offense in order to be able to get affordable rent. And so these are the things that are going to come to the forefront. And with all the other big topics that we debate, Medicaid's going to shove its way to the front of the line again because of its pure fiscal impact on the Commonwealth and its impact on private insurance as well.
The legislature has been ordered by the Commonwealth Court to fix the state's unconstitutional school funding formula. What's the Senate's plan to address that if they have one?
Well, I would say that you've seen it in action over periods of time. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, since that court case has been put in, there's over $5.2 billion towards basic education funding. And actually the number overall to K through 12 education is much higher. The opportunities for kids, I mean, who would ever thought that a program like EITC that started off at $25 million is now at $555 million, which, by the way, I just got news today, they hit that cap. The number of donors who want to participate in that program and the number of scholarship requests, we cannot keep up with the number of families that are looking for those opportunities. So that's been another angle. The Lifeline Scholarship is another angle in terms of accountability. So for me, I live in an interesting place, and I just put this for perspective for folks when you talk about education. A lot of folks, when they talk about wanting another $7 billion, no one ever talks about the five. They had a good run under Governor Wolf and the last couple sessions of the General Assembly. And when you talk about 5.2 to basic education, I would also encourage everyone to also look at the enrollment statistics in a lot of the institutions too. Because some of the schools that we actually spend the most at, some places to the tune of about $35,000 per child, which in a lot of times that's 3 times the amount of money I get for schools in Lancaster County and some of them. But the schools also lost anywhere from 10 to 20% of enrollment. That should raise questions. How does this all play into that? And everyone here knows as well that post-pandemic, there have been a lot of families looking at other opportunities. And so what I want to make sure is that the child is getting the best educational opportunity possible. And I can say there as a parent, even though I went to Lancaster Catholic, my sons go to public school. I love our public school. They do a great job at our public school. I want every parent to have the opportunity to say, I'm doing what's in the best interest of our kids. And when I read that opinion, it's more than just about money in my mind from when I read about it. Because if it's just about money and if it's not about accountability to outcomes as well, what else do we do in state government? I mean, I see people in different industries here that if you didn't meet certain requirements, would you still get your money? No. But somehow we've created a scenario where the answer is always more money. But I ask everyone, if the answer is just money and the place you spend the most money is getting your worst outcomes, what does that say? We have to hold the system accountable. So, long-winded answer to your question, but I'm very passionate about this subject. And I know that anything that's going to come through my committee, which every bill does, has to have accountability to it.
Do you think we'll see an enacted budget by June 30th?
So I tend to always be an optimist. Last year, if you were asking me this question and if I was at this event, I'd be like, and I did, I gave the governor great credit in terms of he really had a real moderate starting place given the playing field of the General Assembly right now. This is a much different budget ask. The governor's going to have to do a lot in getting terms into that building and talking with members of the House and the Senate if he expects to get some of his priorities done. We're going to hold firm in making sure that we don't, put the Commonwealth into any kind of fiscal tailspin. But he's got to get in there and do the work in order to make it happen. Anything's possible. I just want to leave some wiggle room because, we all know what the makeup of the House is. And, luckily it didn't happen last year. I often wondered, what happens if someone had to leave the House of Representatives right now? Maybe for something that's unfortunate that occurs, what does that do to the budget? Because up to this point, every time that those numbers have been even, they've shut down the House and they've disappeared until after a special election. And so I don't know where that's going to go. But we'll be there working hard. And my goal is that we get it done before June 30th. Certainly as a county commissioner, I can have a real appreciation for budgets that go late. I was part of that year. I was still a county commissioner in year 1 of Governor Wolf's term with the budget that went to December. And counties, we provided a lot of human services on behalf of the state. And we were fronting those costs. And, ironically, we did a $40 million bond issue so we could keep our prison operating and our 911 center, and the day that we were settling on the money was the day that Harrisburg decided they were going to pass the budget. So hopefully we don't put local governments, local school districts, in that same predicament. So the goal is always to get it done on time, but most importantly, we want to do it right.
Currently, medical marijuana companies cannot deduct business expenses. Can we count on language in this year's budget?
I'll be honest with you, Francine, it's an issue I'm not very familiar with. Actually, that might be the first I've heard that one in particular. But I mean, whenever there's issues where there's been reinterpretation of law or language, which occurs on many different fronts, depending on a new administration comes in and looks at wording a different way, we try our best to try to look at something and fix it.
I got 3 different iterations of this last question.
Okay.
Do you plan to run for governor in 2026 or 2030?
I don't want to break another leg in my driveway, but. It's really, that was a great experience in my life. Things happen for a reason. Met incredible people all around the state, but I think right now, and you're going to give you just a complete politician answer, is that being part of Senate leadership and having a seat kind of in these discussions with budget negotiations and the other bills that come through our purview, I'm enjoying every second of it. And I also enjoy my children. I was telling you at night, I live outside the radius for Harrisburg, but I drive home every night because I want to be at home in bed with my wife, and I want to kiss my kids goodnight, even though they don't want me to kiss them anymore. They're too cool for that. Having a bunch of kids in high school, there's a lot of memories and things. So I never say never to anything, but I really feel not only committed to the job I'm in right now, which I'm running for re-election for, to represent the people of the 13th. I'm also committed to be the chair of the Appropriations Committee. And most importantly, I'm committed to being a dad that's there for my kids. So.
We'd like to thank Senator Martin and wish him well. We have some mementos for him. These are compliments of PCN and the Pennsylvania Press Club. And in closing, we want to thank you for being with us. Our next luncheon is Monday, June 24th, when our guest will be Mayor of the City of Philadelphia, Sherelle Parker. For scheduling information, visit papressclub.org. Thank you all very much.